Shirk, or polytheism, stands as the gravest and only unforgivable sin in Islam if a person dies upon it without repentance, representing a fundamental violation of Tawheed, the doctrine of God's absolute oneness. Islamic theology defines shirk as the act of associating partners with Allah in His divinity or His attributes. Whether this involves the worship of idols, celestial bodies, saints, prophets, or any other created being, or attributing to them powers that belong exclusively to God, such as the power to create, sustain, or grant salvation. The Quran is unequivocal in its condemnation, stating in Surah An-Nisa, "Indeed, Allah does not forgive association with Him, but He forgives what is less than that for whom He wills. And he who associates others with Allah has certainly fabricated a tremendous sin." This theological principle establishes a clear hierarchy of transgression, placing shirk in a category of its own. It is further classified into two primary forms. Shirk al-Akbar, major shirk, which involves overt acts of worship directed towards other than Allah and results in complete apostasy. And Shirk al-Asghar, minor shirk, which includes actions performed to impress others, such as showing off in prayer, known as Riya, which does not expel one from Islam, but severely diminishes the reward for deeds and corrodes spiritual sincerity. The worldly consequence of major shirk is the nullification of all previous good deeds, rendering them void in the sight of God. Socially and legally, in a classical Islamic state, it would constitute apostasy, carrying severe legal penalties. Spiritually, it severs the connection between the individual and the Creator, plunging the heart into a state of darkness and misguidance. In the grave, traditional sources describe the polytheist as being unable to answer the fundamental questions of the angels Munkar and Nakir regarding their Lord, their religion, and their prophet, resulting in a torment that begins immediately after burial. On the Day of Judgment, the individual who dies upon major shirk will find no intercessor, and their deeds, no matter how outwardly righteous they may have appeared, will be scattered like dust. The final and eternal consequence, as confirmed by scriptural sources, is an irrevocable sentence to hellfire, where they will dwell forever, a fate underscored by the Quranic verse, "Indeed, he who associates others with Allah, Allah has forbidden him paradise, and his refuge is the fire, and there are not for the wrongdoers any helpers." The unlawful taking of a human life, or qatl al-nafs, is ranked among the most heinous of major sins in Islamic jurisprudence, second only to shirk. This prohibition is absolute for any soul that Islam has declared inviolable, which includes Muslims, non-Muslims living under the protection of an Islamic state, dhimmis, and those granted a covenant of security. The Quran establishes the sanctity of human life in the strongest terms, stating in Surah Al-Ma'idah, "Whoever kills a soul unless for a soul or for corruption done in the land, it is as if he had slain mankind entirely, and whoever saves one, it is as if he had saved mankind entirely." This verse illustrates the immense gravity of murder, equating the killing of one innocent person with the annihilation of all humanity. Islamic law, or Sharia, prescribes a specific worldly punishment for premeditated murder known as qisas, or retribution, which grants the family of the victim the right to demand the execution of the murderer, a punishment that must be carried out by the state authority after a rigorous judicial process that requires an incontrovertible standard of proof. Alternatively, the victim's family may choose to forgive the perpetrator and accept blood money diya, or pardon them altogether without compensation, a choice that is encouraged as an act of mercy. Spiritually, murder stains the soul and incurs the wrath of Allah. Hadith literature warns that a murderer will meet Allah on the Day of Judgment with the blood of their victim on their hands, and the victim will be the first to have their case adjudicated. The first case to be settled among people on that day will be that of bloodshed. The punishment in the grave for such an individual is described in traditional eschatology as being severe, a prelude to the greater torment to come. In the hereafter, the unrepentant murderer faces a terrifying fate explicitly detailed in the Quran. But whoever kills a believer intentionally, his recompense is hell, wherein he will abide eternally, and Allah has become angry with him and has cursed him and has prepared for him a great punishment. This combination of eternal damnation, divine anger, a divine curse, and a specially prepared punishment underscores the monumental severity of this crime. Consuming the property of an orphan, referred to in Arabic as akl mal al-yatim, is a major sin condemned with severe warnings in Islamic scripture due to its exploitation of the most vulnerable members of society. An orphan in the Islamic context is defined as a child who has lost their father before reaching the age of puberty. Islamic teachings place an immense emphasis on the just and compassionate treatment of orphans, appointing the community and specifically the guardian as stewards of the orphan's well-being and property until they come of age. The Quran addresses this directly and forcefully, stating in Surah An-Nisa, "Indeed, those who devour the property of orphans unjustly are only consuming into their bellies fire, and they will be burned in a blaze." This verse uses a powerful and visceral metaphor, indicating that the immediate, spiritual consequence of this act is akin to swallowing flames, a reality that will be made physically manifest in the afterlife. The worldly implications of this sin involve a profound breach of trust, leading to social decay and the erosion of communal responsibility. Legally, a guardian found guilty of misappropriating an orphan's wealth is required to make full restitution and faces punishment determined by the governing authorities. Spiritually, the act hardens the heart, removes compassion, and signifies a deep-seated avarice that displeases Allah immensely. On the day of judgment, this sin will be a source of profound humiliation and suffering. Prophetic traditions describe such individuals being resurrected with flames coming out of their mouths, ears, and noses, a public exposure of their hidden crime. Their transgression will be a heavy burden on their scales of deeds, and they will have to account for every single coin they unjustly consumed. The ultimate consequence is the torment of hellfire, as promised in the aforementioned verse, where the metaphorical fire they consumed in the world becomes a literal, agonizing reality, serving as a direct and just retribution for their betrayal of a sacred trust. The severity of the punishment reflects the severity of the crime, preying on a defenseless child who has already suffered the immense loss of their primary protector. The consumption of riba, which translates to usury or interest, is a major sin in Islam, prohibited in the strongest possible terms and described as tantamount to waging war against Allah and His Messenger. Riba refers to the excess or increase stipulated in a loan or exchange of certain commodities, representing profit gained without corresponding labor or risk, thereby creating an exploitative financial system where wealth is generated from debt rather than from productive enterprise. The Quran's prohibition of riba was revealed in stages, culminating in a decisive and absolute ban in Surah Al-Baqarah. O you who have believed, fear Allah and give up what remains due to you of riba, if you are believers. And if you do not, then be informed of a war against you from Allah and His Messenger. This declaration is unique in its severity, as no other sin is described in such confrontational terms. Islamic jurisprudence distinguishes between two main types of riba. Riba al-nasiya, the interest on lent money, which is the most commonly understood form, and riba al-fadl, the unequal exchange of like-for-like commodities. The worldly consequence of a society built on riba is economic instability, the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few, and the systemic oppression of the poor who become trapped in cycles of debt. Spiritually engaging in riba deadens the heart to the plight of others and fosters a culture of greed and materialism. The Prophet Muhammad is reported to have cursed the one who consumes riba, the one who pays it, the one who writes the contract, and the two who witness it, indicating that all who participate in the transaction share in the sin. In the state of barzakh, after death, traditional sources describe a specific punishment for those who consumed riba. In one narration of the Prophet's night journey, Isra and Miraj, he saw people with stomachs as large as houses, filled with snakes that could be seen from the outside, who were being trampled by the people of Pharaoh. When he inquired, he was told these were the consumers of riba. On the Day of Judgment, the Quran states that they will rise like one whom Satan has driven to madness by his touch. Disoriented and unstable, a reflection of their distorted economic reasoning in life. Their final destination is the fire, a just end for those who declared war on the divine economic order. Falsely accusing chaste, believing women of illicit sexual conduct, known as qadhf al-muhsinat, is a major sin that strikes at the heart of social honor, family integrity, and communal trust. This act is considered so destructive that it is specifically mentioned in the Quran as one of the 7 destroyers, the most grievous sins a person can commit. The sin involves making an unsubstantiated allegation of zina, adultery or fornication, against a person, particularly a woman of good character, without producing the stringent level of proof required by Islamic law. The Quran addresses this directly in Surah An-Nur, laying down both the punishment and the social consequences. And those who accuse chaste women and then do not produce 4 witnesses, lash them with 80 lashes and do not accept from them testimony ever after. And it is those who are the defiantly disobedient. This verse establishes a multi-layered punishment. The first is a severe physical penalty of 80 lashes administered by the state. The second is a permanent social and legal consequence. The slanderer's testimony is rendered inadmissible in any future legal proceedings, effectively making them a permanent outcast from the judicial process. The third is a spiritual designation as fasiq, or defiantly disobedient, marking them as transgressors in the sight of Allah. The spiritual impact of this sin is immense, as it spreads corruption, suspicion, and hatred within the community, destroys reputations that can never be fully repaired, and can lead to the dissolution of families. It is an act of profound injustice and cruelty. On the Day of Judgment, the slanderer will have to face their victim before Allah, where true justice will be dispensed. Their good deeds may be transferred to the one they slandered to pay for the crime, and if they have no good deeds to give, the sins of the victim may be cast upon them. Hadith literature warns that such individuals are cursed in this life and the hereafter and are promised a great torment. The sin is not merely a private matter between individuals, but an assault on the entire moral fabric of the community, and its punishment, both in this world and the next, reflects its devastating impact. Fleeing from the battlefield, or al-tawali yawm al-zaf, is designated as a major sin in Islam, representing an act of profound cowardice and betrayal in the context of a legitimate state-sanctioned military engagement. This sin refers to the act of deserting the army during a battle when the Muslim forces are facing the enemy. The prohibition is not a blanket call against tactical retreat, but specifically condemns turning one's back and fleeing out of fear, thereby weakening the Muslim ranks and endangering the lives of one's comrades. The Quran is explicit in its condemnation of this act, stating in Surah Al-Anfal, "O you who have believed, when you meet those who disbelieve advancing for battle, do not turn to them your backs in flight. And whoever turns his back to them on such a day, unless as a stratagem of war or retreating to a company of soldiers, has certainly drawn upon himself anger from Allah, and his refuge is hell, and what a wretched destination." This verse clearly outlines the severity of the act, linking it directly to incurring divine wrath and a promise of hellfire. It also provides two valid exceptions: a tactical maneuver to gain a better position, or a strategic retreat to rejoin another Muslim contingent. Any flight outside of these specific contexts is considered a major transgression. The worldly consequence of desertion is a grave breach of military discipline, punishable by the commander of the army, which could historically include execution to maintain order and morale. Socially, it brings immense shame and dishonor upon the individual and their family. Spiritually, it demonstrates a lack of faith in Allah's promise of aid and a greater fear of creation than of the Creator. It is a failure of trust, courage, and commitment to the community's collective security. On the day of judgment, the deserter will have to account for their cowardice and the potential harm they caused to their fellow soldiers and the wider community. The Quranic verdict is their final end, a refuge in hell described as a wretched destination, a severe outcome for a momentary failure of courage that constitutes a betrayal of God, His messenger, and the community of believers. The practice of magic or sorcery, known as sihr, is unequivocally condemned in Islam as a major sin and an act of disbelief, kufr. It is defined as any practice that seeks to alter the reality of things or to cause harm or benefit to people, through the assistance of supernatural entities such as jinn or devils, employing incantations, talismans, and rituals that are outside the bounds of what Allah has permitted. Islamic theology considers engaging with shir as a direct violation of Tawhid because it involves seeking knowledge of the unseen, ghaib, and power from sources other than Allah, thereby associating partners with Him. The Quran recounts the story of the angels Harut and Marut in Babylon, who would teach magic but only after warning the people. We are but a trial, so do not disbelieve. This historical context from Surah Al-Baqarah serves as a clear proof that the practice itself is an act of disbelief. The worldly punishment for a sorcerer, sahib, in a classical Islamic state is severe, with many early scholars and caliphs, including Umar ibn al-Khattab, prescribing the death penalty based on prophetic traditions and the understanding that sorcery is a form of corruption on earth. Fasad fi al-ard. Spiritually, sihr darkens the soul, corrupts the heart, and severs the practitioner's connection with Allah. It is an enterprise built on deception, illusion, and malice, often used to separate spouses, cause illness, or manipulate people's will, thereby causing immense social harm and discord. The Prophet Muhammad himself was a victim of magic which caused him to suffer a temporary illness, and he taught specific chapters of the Quran, Al-Falaq and An-Nas, as a divine remedy and protection against it. On the day of judgment, the sorcerer will have no share in the good of the hereafter. The Quran states, "The magician will not succeed wherever he comes from." They will be held accountable for all the harm and suffering they inflicted through their illicit craft. Their ultimate fate is hellfire, as their actions constitute a rejection of Allah's sole authority and an alliance with the forces of darkness and evil. Disobedience and disrespect towards one's parents, known as uquq al-walidain, is considered one of the most severe major sins in Islam, often mentioned in Scripture immediately after the prohibition of shirk. This sin encompasses any act or statement that causes grief or harm to one's parents, including defying their reasonable and Islamically permissible commands, speaking to them in a harsh tone, showing them contempt, or neglecting them in their old age. The Quran elevates the status of parents to a position second only to the worship of Allah, commanding in Surah Al-Isra, "And your Lord has decreed that you not worship except Him, and to parents good treatment. Whether one or both of them reach old age, while with you say not to them so much as uff, and do not repel them but speak to them a noble word." The prohibition against even the slightest expression of annoyance, uff, highlights the extreme level of respect and kindness required. This emphasis stems from the recognition of the immense sacrifice parents make in nurturing their children. An authenticated hadith from the Prophet Muhammad ranks disobeying parents as the second greatest sin after associating partners with Allah. The worldly consequences of this sin are often described as being swift. Islamic tradition teaches that the punishment for uquq al-walidain can manifest in this life through a life of hardship, lack of blessing, barakah, in one's wealth and time, and facing similar disobedience from one's own children, creating a generational cycle of distress. Spiritually, it is an act of profound ingratitude not only to the parents but also to Allah, who made them the vessel for one's existence. It hardens the heart and distances a person from divine mercy. On the day of judgment, it will be a source of immense regret and shame. Some narrations suggest that Allah will not look upon the person who was disobedient to their parents on that day, signifying a state of utter abandonment and divine displeasure. Unless the individual sincerely repents and seeks the forgiveness of their parents, this sin serves as a major impediment to entering paradise, regardless of their other righteous deeds. Zina, which encompasses both adultery by a married person and fornication by an unmarried person, is a major sin in Islam that is strictly forbidden due to its destructive impact on the individual, the family, and society at large. The Quran does not merely prohibit the act itself, but commands believers to avoid even the circumstances that might lead to it, stating in Surah Al-Isra, "And do not approach unlawful sexual intercourse. Indeed, it is ever an immorality and is evil as a way." This prohibition on approaching zina is a comprehensive command to avoid flirtation, immodest dress, and seclusion with a member of the opposite sex who is not a close relative, mahram, all of which are seen as precursors to the act. Islamic law, Sharia, prescribes a severe corporal punishment, had, for zina, which serves as a powerful deterrent. For an unmarried person, the punishment is 100 lashes, while for a married person it is stoning to death, rajim. However, the application of these punishments is subject to an extremely stringent standard of proof that is almost impossible to meet, either an uncoerced confession repeated 4 times or the testimony of 4 upright male witnesses who saw the act of penetration itself. The purpose of this high evidentiary bar is to protect personal privacy and prevent false accusations, making the public punishment exceedingly rare while maintaining the gravity of the sin. The social consequences of zina are devastating. It destroys family lineage, creates confusion regarding paternity, spreads disease, and erodes the foundational trust upon which society is built. Spiritually, it is considered a degrading act that darkens the heart and weakens one's faith, iman. A hadith states that when a person commits zina, faith leaves them until they cease the act. In the state of barzakh, traditional narrations describe a specific torment for adulterers. In the Prophet's night journey, he saw men and women in an oven-like structure naked, with a fire raging beneath them. Whenever the fire flared up, they would scream and rise, and when it subsided, they would fall back down. These were identified as the fornicators and adulteresses. In the hereafter, zina is a sin that carries a heavy weight on the scales of deeds and leads to a severe punishment in hellfire, unless it is purified by sincere repentance and forgiveness from Allah. Theft, or sarika, is defined in Islamic jurisprudence as the act of secretly taking the property of another from a secure location, hirts, without their consent, with the intention of permanently depriving them of it. It is a major sin and a crime against property rights, which are held as sacred in Islam. The Quran specifies a definitive corporal punishment, had, for theft in Surah Al-Ma'idah. And as for the male thief and the female thief, cut off their hands as a recompense for what they committed as a deterrent from Allah. and Allah is exalted in might and wise. This punishment, the amputation of the hand, is severe and intended to serve as a powerful public deterrent to protect the wealth of the community. However, its application is strictly governed by a complex set of conditions that must be met without any doubt. Classical Islamic jurisprudence stipulates that the stolen item must have a certain minimum value, nisab. It must have been taken from a place where it was properly secured, and there must be no ambiguity or element of need, such as starvation, that might have compelled the person to steal. If any of these conditions are not met, the had punishment is not applied, and the judge may impose a lesser discretionary punishment, ta'zir. The social impact of theft is the creation of a climate of fear and insecurity, undermining economic activity and trust within the community. Spiritually, theft is a manifestation of greed, dishonesty, and a lack of contentment with what Allah has provided. It is an act of injustice that stains the soul and incurs divine displeasure. On the day of judgment, the thief will be held accountable for their transgression. Prophetic traditions state that the person who was stolen from will be given the good deeds of the thief as compensation. If the thief has no good deeds, the sins of the victim will be transferred to the thief's account. Furthermore, some narrations describe the stolen property being made to appear on the day of judgment, and the thief will be commanded to carry it, a burden that will cause them immense suffering and humiliation in front of all creation before they are cast into the fire. Sincere repentance for theft requires not only seeking Allah's forgiveness, but also returning the stolen property to its rightful owner or seeking their pardon. For the individual whose life was dominated by unrepentant major sins, the process of death is described in Islamic eschatology as a terrifying and agonizing ordeal. The experience begins with the arrival of the angel of death, Azrael, accompanied by angels of punishment, whose appearance is fearsome and severe. Traditional sources describe these angels as having dark faces, carrying coarse shrouds from hellfire, and emitting a foul odor. They sit at a distance from the dying person, a silent, menacing presence that foreshadows the torment to come. The angel of death then positions himself at the head of the sinner and addresses the soul with harshness, commanding it to exit the body to face the wrath and anger of Allah. The soul, comprehending the dreadful fate that awaits it, becomes terrified and clings to the body, refusing to leave. It scatters throughout the limbs and sinews, seeking refuge from the inevitable. The angel of death then extracts the soul with immense violence, a process compared to pulling a multi-pronged iron skewer through wet wool, tearing the veins and nerves as it is ripped from the flesh. This is the first taste of the physical torment that is to follow, an experience of unimaginable pain that fulfills the Quranic description of the pangs of death. Once extracted, the soul is not given a moment of respite. The angels of punishment immediately seize it and wrap it in the foul-smelling shroud brought from hell, and from it emanates the stench of a rotting carcass. They then begin their ascent through the heavens with the soul, but at each gate the angels guarding it ask, "Who is this wicked soul?" and refuse it entry. It is rejected and cast down from the lowest heaven back to the earth, a humiliation that culminates in its forceful return to its decaying body in the grave, where the next phase of its trial is set to begin. This entire sequence is a prelude of horror, designed to make the sinner understand the reality of the divine displeasure they have earned through their life of transgression. Following the burial and the departure of the mourners, the soul of the sinner is forcefully reunited with its body in the grave, initiating the state of barzakh, the intermediary period between death and the day of resurrection. It is at this moment that the trial of the grave, known as Fitnat al-Qabr, commences. Two angels of formidable and terrifying appearance named Munkar and Nakir are dispatched to interrogate the deceased. They are described in Hadith literature as being dark and blue-eyed, with voices like thunder and eyes like flashing lightning, carrying massive iron hammers. They cause the person to sit up in their grave and begin a stern interrogation, posing three fundamental questions that every soul must answer. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? And who is this man who was sent amongst you, referring to the Prophet Muhammad? For the believer, these answers are instinctive, a natural affirmation of the faith they lived by. For the unrepentant sinner, the hypocrite, or the disbeliever, the experience is one of utter confusion and terror. Despite knowing the correct answers intellectually in their worldly life, their tongue will be unable to utter them. Their life of sin, their attachment to worldly desires, and their neglect of their duties to Allah will form a veil over their hearts and minds. When asked, "Who is your Lord?" the sinner will stammer in confusion, I do not know." When asked, "What is your religion?" they will reply, I do not know. I heard the people saying something, so I said it too," revealing that their faith was merely a superficial imitation without any real conviction. When asked about the Prophet Muhammad, they will again profess their ignorance. At this moment of catastrophic failure, a voice from the heavens will declare, "My servant has lied. So prepare for him a bed from the fire, open for him a gate to the fire, and clothe him from the fire." The sinner's inability to answer is not a failure of memory, but a direct consequence of their life's actions. Their heart, which was turned away from God in life, is unable to turn towards Him in death, sealing their fate for a period of torment that will last until the day of judgment. Upon failing the interrogation of the grave, the sinner's period of torment, known as Adhab al-Qabr, begins immediately and without delay. This punishment is a direct and fitting prelude to the greater torments of hellfire and varies in nature and intensity according to the sins committed during one's life. The first consequence is the immediate transformation of the grave's environment. The promised bed from the fire is laid out, and the gate to the fire is opened, allowing a blast of its heat and poisonous winds, Samum, to continuously scorch the inhabitant. The grave, which for a believer expands into a spacious garden, constricts and presses in on the sinner from all sides with such force that their ribs are crushed and interlock. This physical agony is constant and unrelenting. The angels Munkar and Nakir then strike the sinner with the immense iron hammer, a blow so powerful that if a mountain were struck with it, it would turn to dust. The sinner screams a cry of agony so loud that it is heard by all of creation except for humans and jinn, and they are turned to dust by the blow, only to be reformed by Allah to endure the strike again and again. Beyond this general torment, traditional sources describe specific punishments for specific sins. For instance, those who were habitual liars will have their mouths torn open to their ears. Those who committed adultery will be placed in a fiery, oven-like enclosure. Those who consumed riba, usury, will be made to swim in a river of blood, with angels on the bank pelting them with stones every time they try to escape. Those who neglected the obligatory prayers will have their heads repeatedly crushed by a boulder. The sinner is also shown their designated place in hellfire every morning and every evening, a constant psychological torture that fills them with dread and despair, forcing them to witness the ultimate destination their actions have secured for them. This state of physical and psychological torment continues unabated throughout the entire duration of Barzakh, which could last for thousands of years, ceasing only upon the sounding of the first trumpet blast that signals the end of the world. The torment of the grave will continue until the appointed time when Allah commands the angel Israfil to sound the first trumpet blast, an event known as al-Nafkha al-Sa'aka, the blast of smiting. This is a sound of such terrifying and overwhelming power that everything in the heavens and the earth will be struck with terror and then perish, except those whom Allah wills to spare. The mountains will crumble into dust, the seas will boil over, the stars will fall from the sky, and the very fabric of the cosmos will be torn asunder. All living creatures, including the angels who carry the throne of God and the angel Israfil himself, will cease to exist. A period of 40, of which the duration is known only to Allah, will pass in absolute silence and emptiness. Then Allah will resurrect the angel Israfil and command him to sound the second trumpet blast, known as al-Nafka al-Ba'ath, the blast of resurrection. At this sound, a life-giving rain will fall from the heavens, and from the coccyx, the tailbone, which Islamic tradition holds is the only part of the body that does not decay, all bodies will be resurrected. People will emerge from their graves as if they were sprouts growing from the earth, naked, barefoot, and uncircumcised, just as they were when they were first born. The Quran describes this moment vividly. And the trumpet will be blown, and behold, from the graves they will rush forth to their Lord. They will rise in a state of shock and confusion, with the sinners and disbelievers crying out, "Woe to us! Who has resurrected us from our sleeping place?" They are then driven together to a vast, featureless plain known as the Plain of Gathering, Ard al-Mahshar. This is the beginning of Yawm al-Qiyamah, the Day of Standing, a day that is described as being 50,000 years long. On this day, the sun will be brought down to a distance of only a mile above their heads, causing the heat to become unbearable. People will begin to perspire in proportion to their sins, with some drowning in their own sweat up to their ankles, some up to their knees, some up to their waists, and for the most egregious sinners, the sweat will reach their mouths, acting as a bridle. It is in this state of extreme distress, humiliation, and terror that humanity will stand for an immense period, awaiting the commencement of the final judgment. After a long and agonizing wait on the Plain of Gathering, the judgment, or al-Hisab, will commence. Allah will descend in a manner befitting His Majesty, and every soul will be brought forth to account for its deeds. This process is one of absolute precision and perfect justice, where nothing is hidden. The first part of the judgment involves the presentation of the Book of Deeds, Kitab al-Amal. This is a comprehensive record of every action, word, and intention a person had throughout their life, recorded by the angels Kiraman Katibin. The righteous will be given their book in their right hand, a sign of honor and salvation, and they will joyfully exclaim, "Here, read my record." The unrepentant sinner, the hypocrite, and the disbeliever will receive their book in their left hand or from behind their back, a mark of utter disgrace and impending doom. Upon seeing the contents of their book, they will cry out in despair, "Oh, woe to us! What is this book that leaves nothing small or great except that it has enumerated it?" They will find everything they did present before them. Following this, the weighing of the deeds, or al-Mizan, will take place. A gigantic real scale with 2 pans will be established, a scale so vast that it could contain the heavens and the earth. The deeds of every person will be given a physical form and placed on the scale. Good deeds will be heavy, while evil deeds will be light. Even the smallest acts of good, like removing a harmful object from the road, and the smallest acts of evil will be weighed. If a person's good deeds outweigh their bad, they are destined for success. If their bad deeds outweigh their good, they are facing ruin. For the greatest sinners, the scale of good deeds may be entirely empty. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the judgment for the sinner is the testimony of their own body parts. When the sinner attempts to lie and deny their transgressions, Allah will seal their mouths and command their limbs to speak. Their hands will testify to what they stole or struck. Their feet will testify to where they walked to commit sin. Their eyes will testify to what they illicitly looked at, and their skin will testify against them. The Quran states, "That day we will seal over their mouths, and their hands will speak to us, and their feet will bear witness about what they used to earn." This leaves the sinner with no defense utterly exposed and convicted by their own being before the King of all kings.